Welcome to Onesies. Hello and welcome to Onesies, a podcast of one season wonders and blunders. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Emily.
And we are 2/6 or 2/8 or something. How many are there?
Six of them. So we're a third of the way through.
Wow, we're a third of the way through Chessgame, a 1983 British Granada television program about spies.
And the women who love them.
And the women who get very excited by them. Or the woman. We actually have less speaking female parts in this episode than last episode. But it's okay because we've got more men. And lots of them actually turn out to be really stupid, which is kind of funny. Though also not. So you were saying you don't actually have three things to talk about.
I don't actually have three things, but I read over the last week the novel that these two episodes are based on loosely, but not as loosely as you might think. So I have a lot to talk about in terms of the difference between the two. I know last week we had talked about maybe how the novel might flesh out some of the, not inconsistencies, but some of the strange character traits of the characters. And so we can talk about that too a little bit, but I suspect it's not going to fully answer the question until we watch the whole series. I'm guessing that the whole series, there's going to be a slight arc. Again, I haven't watched them all yet, but there's going to be a slight arc, and that character is going to be developed throughout the series.
Okay, but I will still do my three things because some of them are funny.
Okay.
Including get that TV licensed. Oh, the British. Wagner jokes.
Ugh.
Ugh.
Oh, Wagner, Paul. Wagner.
We'll have to wait for it. I don't know. How about the British parade scene? Because that actually raises some things. That actually post Trump wanting to have military parades, seeing the British do it in 1983 really raises some imperialist imagery. But so first, I wanted to talk about how we do the previously on.
Yes. And
one of the lines they keep for the previously on is Faith and Terrence Stamp in his converted fuck pad. And I'm sorry, he's got a futon mattress in there. That's what he uses that for. That's not for him to hide out from people breaking in. That's where he takes the ladies. He should have shown a wine bar, but they actually repeat the line, "You're not one of those queer intelligence men, are you?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, that's the other lot." And I was just like,
I still don't get it.
Thing.
Yeah.
One hell of a thing to define in your previously on. So that's not explained in the book.
No.
Okay.
No.
Interesting that they included that. Okay. So then the episode picks up immediately after in the priest hole / fuck pad. And he's like, "When do you have to go to work?" And she's like, "How do you know where I work?" And he's like, "I know everything about you. I'm a spy." And then she's like, "Not until 11." And then he says, "Well, then there's time for another fuck."
And and it's so uncomfortable. I was watching it going, ugh, 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 bleh. Like it was getting increasingly intimate, and you don't see anything. I mean, there's a little bit of skin, but you don't see.
There's a lot of skin for this. There's actually quite a bit of skin.
I was at some point like, are we going to see her boobs?
I thought they were like, we're doing everything we can not to show them. This is Granada, baby. This ain't the BBC.
Yeah.
So I'm very glad Granada's Sherlock Holmes. I'm glad the Arthur Conan Doyle estate did not let them do every bit of skin you can do on television, which apparently was their flex here. So then we've got this weird scene where they talk about how maybe he made up the Prowlers to get her into bed, and then they list the ways that he couldn't have done that, and I'm just kind of like,
it's weird. It's odd that they did that, because it was hinted at before when she says something like, "Oh, you're not just making this up to get me into bed." But then, yeah, she's going, "Oh, you couldn't have, like, who did you have throw a rock through the window, and why would you do that?" And like, it's very, it was odd and unnecessary.
But in the previously on, they changed that a little bit, where we don't see the rock come through the window. We see bad guy, who gets a name later, break the glass, which is a different shot after she'd already gone into the priest hole with him. So it's like, it's not quite a retcon, but it's also like you're forgetting that they threw a rock through the bedroom window, which made no sense. But then we get this. Okay, so they go through the house. They talk about how the glass has been replaced. That's what it is. So they searched it. It's his house, he says, has been well turned over by experts. Now, Chessgame is a single season, limited series, whatever. We're making an exception because Dracula, the series, was soul-sucking.
So atrocious.
And so you would think there wouldn't be that big of difference between the first and second episodes. But we do get some slightly different characterization to Terrence Stamp here, where last episode, he seemed like a egghead who just did analysis. In this one, he seems like he's stuck in analysis because he, fucked around and pissed off his bosses too much being a spy, which is not what we previously had. But he'll say things like, my house has been well turned over by experts. How would you know that? How would also, they didn't find your fuckhole. Like, you literally were in the, like, it's part of the house. They should have been like, that's weird. Where's that window?
So in the book, I don't remember this in the TV show. They describe, she addresses this, Faith, and she says, well, how come they didn't find this? And he says, oh, well, it's, there's like 10 feet of brick between the bedroom and the hole. And like, unless you are doing very exact measurements of the home, you would never miss that, whatever that 10 square foot room is. You would never miss it, unless you were being. And he says in the book, again, that he didn't even know it existed until he happened upon it. Like, the house has been in his family for a long time. He didn't even realize it existed until he just happened upon it. Doing those
when he watched his dad come out of there with the maid. Gotcha. But then we get into this whole, what's sort of our first act subplot, is the house been booby trapped, which we sort of get an answer on, but we don't get very specific answers on its bugging. But first, we go back to the office where we meet Colin, who is a new character. He's a familiar actor. He is played by... Do you have his name handy?
I didn't recognize him.
You didn't? Oh my goodness! We're gonna go. Oh, you're in for it now because we got to go through the list.
He was really good, and like you had said in pre-show, Chessgame. Like you had said in pre-show, very likable, very friendly, very down to earth for a spy.
Ooh, very cool. We're gonna have Art Malik playing a Middle Eastern terrorist at some point.
He's not listed on IMDb, this guy.
This guy is David Haig.
David Haig. Hague.
Haig.
Okay.
He was in the first Downton Abbey movie as Mr. Wilson. He was in... I'm trying to think.
There's so many characters in that movie, in that show, period, that it's hard to keep track. So I don't recognize him from that.
He's not a regular, I don't think. He was in a bunch of... okay, so he was in The Thin Blue Line, which I recognized him from. That's a British comedy with Rowan Atkinson, and he is the dipshit DI who everybody sort of makes fun of. Let's see, there was some other stuff that I saw early on. He's been on a couple Doctor Who's. This is not that good of a list. Let's go to IMDb.
That's where I am right now.
And it took me to his trivia page, which is
Urban Myths, Downton Abbey. Penny.
Okay, so he was just in the Downton Abbey movie. He was on Penny Dreadful. Guy's been around forever. I feel like there was something else I saw here.
I've never seen any of this stuff.
You've seen the Downton Abbey movie.
I've seen the Downton Abbey movie. Just young Indiana Jones.
I mean, I know you've seen that. Chancer with young Clive Owen. I know that you've seen that.
Nope.
Morons from Outer Space.
Nope.
The Moon Stallion.
But it's a lot of stuff. He's been on a lot of stuff.
He's been in a lot of, so he's recognizable to me. Oh, he's in 4 Weddings and a Funeral. That's the thing. He's Bernard. He's the groom at wedding number 2. Like, as soon as I saw that, I could place him. Anyway, he's very likable.
Interestingly, they made a TV movie of the second book that I haven't read yet of this book series. They made a TV movie and he played Colin Jenkins in the TV movie, not the episode. The episode is listed separately. This is in 1986. They made a movie out of it and he played the same character. Isn't that weird?
Wow, that is weird. That is weird. Or maybe it got edited together for American television. You'll have to investigate in between. But we have to get back to my first point. Okay, so this is where we establish he's overworked. He's been on all night. The other bossish guy, like the office manager from last episode, who I haven't committed to memory, but looks like he might have been in Raiders of the Lost Ark. He comes in and he's like, hey, Colin, I need you to go do a sweep of Dr. Audrey's house. He thinks some shenanigans have gone on. And Colin's like, I'm tired, dude. I want to play my football this afternoon. And the guy's like, this is MI5. Don't say things like that to me. Get to work and bring along the muscle pool. Now, we have been mentioning on the program at least once, possibly twice now, the current show Slow Horses with Gary Oldman. It's a spy show. They call the MI5 grunts the dogs, which I was like, oh, were they called the muscle pool in 1983? But then, and at this point, Colin is working on a TV that he found somewhere, somebody found, and he's getting it back in working order because he's, an IT guy in 1983. And the boss says to him, hey, now, you better get that TV license too. Because this is the UK, baby. You got to have a license for that TV. And that's why you can't steal the BBC with your VPN, folks. Okay. So back at David's, this is so weird because we're now going to introduce Faith into the main plot in a way that she's basically a Bond girl. Yeah. But she hangs out with Hugh, the sidekick, for most of the episode. They have a whole investigation subplot. As far as we can tell, she does not go to work and she does not call in to work. We have done our due diligence that she is a person who has a life, and now she is entirely subservient to our A plot.
In the book, she's on some quarter break or something. Okay. She's on some break, and so she doesn't actually have to report to work.
Very cool.
But and also, interestingly, because in the book and the movie, in the terms of their relationship, kind of lines up. He talks about Faith and Hugh hanging out, like, oh, I was about to introduce her to Hugh, and I look over and notice they're already talking. And he's having this internal dialogue about how, Hugh is more her age and he's more handsome. And, I don't know why I'm getting all riled up about this. And then he says, this is crazy. I've known this woman for 3 days. He's already falling in love with this woman, and it's weird.
So that happens in the episode a little bit later, but we don't have this weird internal monologue about it. Yeah. Because that's a thing, guys. When you write a book in the first person, you have to justify your protagonist's inexplicable infatuation becoming LUV love. Yeah. This episode, the whole time, it's like, I feel like this has been ruined for what, 30 years now, 20 years now, since Speed did the whole, relationships that form after intense like action movies don't work out.
Yeah, it's
And
based
like,
it's rooted in trauma. That's called trauma bonding, and it's not
right,
healthy. Like,
right. Every movie since 1919 has been about a trauma bonding romance, and this is no different.
yeah.
Though, yeah, it's a little, but oh God. So first, and this is where, so Colin's got a whole arc this episode. You'll understand when we get to the end why we're talking about Colin so much. But he starts with David not really liking him and Hugh having to convince him that he's okay. But at the beginning, besides him complaining he doesn't get to play footy, the next thing is he's talking about how he wants to like peep on Faith taking a bubble bath at Dr. Audley's after it's been cleaned for booby traps. So this is where we get back to the booby trap thing. They clear the house for explosives. They discuss like whether or not there are bugs, whether or not there are other things, but they never actually resolve whether or not the house is bugged. I don't think.
They do. And this is where reading the book at the same time as watching the show is bad, because I don't remember. They do in the book explain that there's a bug in the house. And I think they do in the TV show too.
No.
Okay.
No, they for sure do not. Yeah.
This is the problem. I watched the show first before I got to the second episode. So I had all of the characters, the accents, everything in my head. So I'm imagining when I'm reading the book, these characters exactly the same. But in the book, the house is bugged and Faith is like, maybe we shouldn't be talking in here. He's like, we should talk as much as we want to in this house because these losers need something to do.
He said that of course we should speak, but he doesn't explain much about why. He calls them impotent non-entities might be looking at us like it's, but they don't establish that it's been bugged. Instead, what we get is this explanation that the car has a tracking device on it.
Yeah.
It has not been booby trapped.
And also, it's Hugh. It's Hugh who is doing this. So we're getting a whole new side to this character. And again, in the book, it's a completely different character. Yes. It might be Colin, it might be somebody else, but it's not Hugh. Hugh comes later. But so we see, Robin Sachs and that thing unbuttoned all the way to his belly button. Yes, please.
He is a spy.
I immediately Googled to see whether he was married to a woman or had been in a lifetime partnership with a man. Because he's so youthful, I guess, in this, and I'm not used to seeing him like that. But that thing unbuttoned all the way to his navel was ridiculous.
There's also the scene where he gets to have his gun and he gets he leaps down, and I'm like, he was waiting for that take. You're just like Terrence Stamp's just like, come on, man, you're a British man. Speak English. Be calm about this. Take my voting advice. Just ask Emily. Okay. But here's where we get this weird thing about Faith and Terrence Stamp, where he's like, okay, take her to the hotel. We're not going to stay here. And he's like, take who to the hotel? And he's like, her, Faith. And he's like, oh, Mrs. Steerforth. Now, this is where we get a call back to that Robin was at the funeral undercover as a squadron leader. Robin is a squadron leader. He just didn't know this dude. So, he was there somewhat legitly, he was there as a representative of the Air Force or something. But this is where we get the, so you want me to get you 2 rooms of the hotel, right, sir? And Faith's like, oh no, 1 will do, won't it, David? And David's like, yes, it will.
And Robin starts laughing.
Yes.
He starts laughing, and it was so funny. It was so cute.
Well, also, remember last episode, Robin had to tell David that, not everybody thinks it's cute that you're fucking around with the star witness, dude. It made your employee really uncomfortable, and you made fun of her for that. And now this is the subplot of episode 2: is everybody gets to deal with the fact that his girlfriend's along for the ride.
Yeah.
Who theoretically at this point could be a Russian agent. They don't know.
So that was my remember last episode I said I've got a theory, and my theory was that she was a double agent of some kind. at the end of this episode, it does not appear to be the case. But it's still in the back of my mind, like, why are you, as a spy, like, this girlfriend that you've known, this woman you've known for 3 days, who's now your girlfriend, you're telling her all of this stuff, you're just unloading. Not to mention the fact that this has a lot to do with her father, and her father doing illegal things, potentially war crimes. No, I guess not war crimes, but like really international illegal things.
So we then cut to Raiders of the Lost Ark boss with the big boss. And they are talking about a report or something. And it's basically about Palin coming over from Russia and their plan. This is the plan that we are just finding out about now.
Yeah.
We went through a whole episode, but this is what's actually going on. MI5 made a fake plane with a fake dead body of some and an empty cargo hold, dumped it in that lake that's not Steerforth or whatever the guy's name is, to trick David and Palin, his Russian counterpart, so Palin will come over and they will put the two of them together and see if Palin tells David's Russian secrets that he shouldn't have, and somehow they'll know this stuff.
So, interesting note. Again, difference between the book. Painin, isn't actually known to David in the book. David has no idea who this guy is because David is an Oxford professor of Middle Eastern like literally Middle Eastern studies. So he deals only with the Middle East. And Painin is Russian. So he doesn't know anything about this guy. So throughout the book, or the middle part of the book, I guess, he is trying to figure out who is Painin, what his interest in this. So, I mean, it's kind of the same. They're trying to figure out why Russia has any interest in this whatsoever. And they come up with an interesting theory that I don't think is discussed in the TV. Their theory is that that John Steerforth, has stolen Schliemann gold. Schliemann was the guy who discovered Troy and dug up all of these supposedly Trojan treasures. And they come up with the story, because I don't think it's historically accurate, that the Russians had it. They were storing it in East Germany, and somehow Steerforth got a hold of it and was bringing that into England. I was going to say the U.S. That's different. Bringing it into England to, whatever. Which I thought was really interesting, because I think the theory comes from a discussion, and Audley is there, Faith is there, and there's another person there who I don't quite remember, but they come up with it completely independently. And it's like, oh, that's got to be what it is. So there's like a whole section of the book, like a good third or 2/3 of the book, where you're thinking that they're looking for this Trojan treasure. It's bizarre and weird. And also, no idea who Painin is. No idea why he needs to have anything to do with Painin at all. It's very weird, because in the show, he's positioned as like some direct rival. So as if he's the Russian spy dealing in, not the case.
No. And that actually makes sense for why, when they finally meet, Terrence Stamp doesn't like seem to care about him at all.
Yeah.
Like it's set up like they're going to be
they're going to have a battle of wits. It's going to be
and like a buddy cop thing. Like Terrence Stamp's Jim Belushi, this other guy's Schwarzenegger. It's red heat time, baby. But no. Okay.
Hey Andrew, who died and made Jim Belushi famous?
Jim Belushi apparently makes pot and is apparently a non-problematic.
As long as he's not making sitcoms.
There you go. As long as he's not making sitcoms.
Where he's married to some young, beautiful person.
We don't need to talk about the American sitcom, though it would be interesting to see if we could find one that is like a perfect example of a husband sitcom that only lasted a season. Okay, but moving on, we have to get to our little trip to the airfield, which is like, why aren't they at the hotel? And apparently Hugh was like, hey, Faith, before we go check into the hotel, do you want to go look at this old airfield of your dad's? And she's like, sure, that sounds fun. And so they go out there, they look around, talk about things, and they run into a caretaker. This will be important in a bit. But first, then we go to David meeting with Theo, the Nazi hunter that we met last time, who Emily said don't Google. And speaking of don't Google, this is where Terrence Stamp is like, hey, man, I've always wondered this. Why do you Jews like Wagner so much? And the guy's just like, what? And it's like, it's really weird because it's like, they play it like this guy had no idea that was coming. And he's like, yeah, man, like, why do you guys like try to pretend you're little birds in cages or something? And the guy's just like, did you just really say that to me? And I'm like, oh, you know, the British, they make a little bit more sense.
You know,
everybody fucking hates them for a reason.
There's a thing in the UK, and I'm more familiar with British comedy than I am with British drama, but they really have a thing about Hitler. I mean, they were really not like, except for what's his name? Roald Dahl, right? Not like Hitler had a few good ideas. Not in that way, but they're like fixated on it because they were getting bombed by the Germans on the reg. So they're pretty fixated on it. So to see it turned in that way, to be like making fun of this Jewish guy, I was pretty uncomfortable with that scene and pretty unsure.
Very, very weird.
Pretty unsure what happened there, where that came from. That was not in the book, if you can believe that.
Was Red Sea pedestrians in the book?
No, it was not. In fact,
okay, and we said this last time. They bigoted it up for TV.
There was mention of foreigners, but the book was written in the 70s, so it was a lot earlier and closer to the height of the Cold War, right? So, yeah.
Okay, so now we get this. I do not understand the purpose of this scene, but the scene continues to go on and talk about, okay, so yes, the why keep a bird in a cage is Theo's got a pet bird. And Terrence Stamp is like, hey, man, isn't that like having a bird in a concentration camp? And you're just like, no. And it's just like, this is weird. Like, did Terrence Stamp just get racist? Did he just get bigoted? They filmed it?
And what it takes a comedic turn when the guy's like, what else is the bird going to do? Go out and get ravaged by pigeons?
Pigeons, yeah.
Like, he's like, I'm not going to let this bird go out and get like destroyed by all these common birds.
Well, it's also this like shitty moment where you're like, oh, I'm a Holocaust survivor. And I spent most of my life putting up with shit from British guys who want to tell jokes about the Holocaust at my expense. Funny. This is such a great, yay, patriarchy. Okay.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Then we get this back and forth about what's in the boxes that were on the plane. We get a red herring about how they aren't Gestapo records, but there's something that the Soviets want to keep hidden. And Terrence Stamp's like, well, I don't think there are treasures, but, somebody's willing to kill for it.
Yeah.
And then at the end, Theo's like, at the end of the scene, is like, I know what's in the boxes. And cut to Hugh and Faith talking to the caretaker at the airfield or some shit. Her dad landed and took off again. This is a big secret. He landed, he taxied, he took off again. Maybe he dropped something off at the airfield. Dun dun.
Dun dun.
End
dun.
part one. Okay, yeah. I'm sorry. The caretaker shows up at the end to stop them with a shotgun.
Yes.
He has not been there yet. I'm sorry. I was getting ahead of myself.
It was that was weird. That caught me off guard. The shotgun.
Yeah. Thing. And then when we come back from commercial, we're at the office with David and Colin, not at the airbase. Is this where they work out their whole scheme or not yet?
No, not until like the end of the episode. Like,
okay, so they're just having like a moment where we're like, oh, David doesn't like Colin. And also we're not getting the resolution to the cliffhanger. But then we do get the resolution to the cliffhanger where the guy with the shotgun's like, hey, sorry about that, white people. They were just some foreigners. They were the wrong kind of white people.
But also, isn't it the military has been trying to buy this land from me forever, and I keep telling them I'm not going to sell, and you guys keep coming back?
Something like that.
Or is
that
that
up.
That's in the book.
That's also in here. I'm not interested in selling.
Yeah.
But there's also a joke about turning it into an open air prison, like that Faith makes. But Hugh shows the guy pictures, and he recognizes the man from David's house. He recognizes the Russian guy. Faith's like, that's the dude who was at David's house and wanted to buy
the Gene Shalit looking motherfucker, right? Yeah.
Who, incidentally, was at David's house north of London, however far, and then immediately in the next scene was in London following David. Yeah. So like we've established that they are not just Eastern European looking Gene Shalit types. They are the same guy who will have a name later on. Okay. The people were searching the control tower, blah, blah, blah. But then we cut and we go to the bookstore. This is the bookstore where David talks to his friend, the Mossad agent.
But not before. Is this where he has kind of the passive-aggressive showdown with the quote-unquote Arab?
Yes, he does have a passive-aggressive showdown with the Arab. I'm not seeing him credited. But he probably is on the episode. I don't think IMDb is complete for this. So yes, so there's a lengthy scene where he and this guy, this Middle Eastern-ish looking guy, look at each other a bunch. They're all quiet and weird in this bookstore.
And he's talking in code to his friend Jake over and over again about utopia, about this, about that, which is the code word, right? That's their code word. Like later on, Jake calls him and Lee says, utopia. Tell him I'm calling about utopia. Gets him on the phone right away.
You mean in the scene where they're like, don't talk to your Israeli secret agent friend
and then
about
bring,
utopia
bring.
again? Bring, bring. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but then, so there's this weird scene. It cuts to Hugh and Faith getting to the hotel where we get this repeating comic bit with the bellhop who thinks they're married, but not really married because they're registered under Mr. Smith. And then he's like, no, I'm in another room.
Yeah.
And then there's this weird moment where Faith's like, what does David really do? And he was like, well, he's a civil servant.
Mm-hmm.
But then we cut back to the book where the bookseller, whose name I have forgotten, I wish I hadn't.
Jake something.
Is it Jake?
Mm-hmm.
Jake and the customer are having this weird standoffish thing about how much his book's going to cost. But he's like, really, he reads out the title and comments on it, and then he sells it to him for £8. And then that guy leaves. So then David's like, who's that? And he's like, that's just an Arab. And then they talk about how he'd been hanging out with Theo and he found out what's in those boxes.
Yeah.
The Czar's crown jewels. And there'd been a comment that the Soviets wanted to destroy the contents of these boxes. So presumably if you're going to destroy the Czar's crown jewels, it is so you can crush the spirit of the Russian royalists or whatever, the whites in 1983. Okay, sure. Then we get Jake saying, well, I don't know any more than this. I can't help you. You're going to have to talk to Payton when he gets here. We've heard that he wants to talk to you. So David winks at him and says, "You're such a tease," and then he leaves. And I'm just kind of like, what is this scene? This episode honestly feels like it came after the first movie. Like, not the first episode, like they completed a first movie with Terrence Stamp. This feels like the sequel to that.
Yeah.
Just in terms of how much the characters changed. Remember, last episode, he spent a bunch of time whining about how he didn't like his new assignment to a stranger.
And I would like to just place this in here just now. That movie I was telling you about from 1986 is indeed the TV show seemingly stuck together to make a movie. But I didn't see where it was aired.
So then we get a scene with Llewellyn. Remember him? He's the guy who doesn't like David, but said he doesn't have anything personally wrong with him last episode.
Yeah.
He's now meeting with Raiders of the Lost Ark boss and talking, and he's got information. He's got a recording of David talking, or pictures of David with Jake, the Israeli book seller.
Jake Shapiro. That's
Shapiro.
Yeah.
Was that his name in the book?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Maybe they had
I'm surprised it wasn't like Jakob or something,
right,
not Jake.
Maybe they had
like my nephew, my 25-year-old nephew's name is Jake.
David Icke work on the names for the TV version. Okay. So then, yes. So Llewellyn actually he's been following David. He's been catching him, talking to people he shouldn't have. He wants a formal request to boot him out. And the Raiders of the Lost Ark guy's like, yeah, we're not fucking doing that, dude.
Yeah.
And he's like, you better do it. And he's like, sure, whatever. And then the scene ends, are you going to do it? And the guy's like, well, I heard you say I have to do it. And it's like, but I'm not gonna. Like, this is not an actual subplot. Go away. So, okay, now this one's weird. We go to the Bull Hotel. David gets the Bull Hotel or something. We establish there are spy-looking guys in the yard. They do not matter. They are just a couple gentlemen hanging out on a scenic bench, and the show has fixated on them for no reason.
They're drinking a beer and making it look like they're spying on the spies.
But apparently not. Maybe that's next episode. But then we get our biggest, and maybe the last in this episode, weird David talking to himself scene. Somebody's talking about how they lost 50p on something, and the barmaid, and
it's like, it's not video poker because I don't think that was a thing then, but yeah, there's something on the bar and he lost 50p. Maybe it's a video game near the bar. It's very weird. It's like this very strange normal conversation happening amongst spies at a bar.
You're being very nice. I felt like it was that David usually roofies the barmaid and Hugh lets him get away with it, and this isn't how that usually plays, or something like that. It was really weird.
It was weird.
It was like Terrence Stamp was trying to pick up the barmaid, and Robin Sachs was like, how'd that work out for you? He's like, I lost 50p. He's like, I usually do better than that, Terrence. And he's like, yeah, I do. I'm like Neil before Zod, and it just didn't work out. Oh yeah, what happened what did you find in your investigation? And then we get exposition.
Yeah. And they're just again, remember last episode, they went through a fucking car wash to have a conversation so they wouldn't be seen. Now they're just in the middle of a bar. Dozens of people around them.
Meeting Paynin or something.
Yeah.
Right? Like they wave at each other. And then
very weird.
They change because there's a David in a towel note I've got here.
Oh yeah, because Faith is in the hotel room and they have sort of a fleshy moment.
Oh, this is
again. I thought I was going to see. Thought I was going to see something that I didn't get to see. Very disappointing.
Sorry about that. But this is also where he refers to her as a young lady, which is, I don't know, seems like a weird flex.
So they have this conversation, right? That he's like, I'm too old for you, or is that
that's in the book?
Okay.
No, they don't talk about that. You think Terrence Stamp says those words? No.
Well, I don't think he has to. I don't think he cares. But
maybe later. Maybe later he says that.
Another very interesting note. In the book, they go to the hotel together. There's no Robin Sachs involvement. Okay. There's no Hugh involvement. They go to the hotel together. They go in and they have a conversation about there's the whole Mrs. Audley thing, not Mrs. Smith, Mrs. Audley thing, and she starts calling herself Mrs. Audley, and she's like, well, I will be Mrs. Audley when you marry me. In the book, she's very like, well, when you marry me. And it's like, this is day 4 of knowing this man. You don't know what he does for a living. Seemingly it's dangerous, and you're ready to fucking marry the guy. Cool.
She's in a Bond movie.
For a physics teacher, she's pretty fucking ballsy.
Yes, but then we also established that she's still worried that David is just after her for her knowledge. And he's like, no, don't worry about that.
She asks, is this business or pleasure? Again, I think.
Okay, so then we get Payne landing and talking to, I think, Raiders of the Lost Ark boss.
I think so too.
And he's like, where's David? And they're like, well, we don't know where he is. And he's like, well, he's at the Bull Hotel having drinks with Robin Sachs in the bar right now, which lends credence to the idea that those guys outside are spies, except it doesn't explain where they're going to go for the end of the episode. We then establish in a throwaway bit that they only introduce so they can talk about it twice, that Payne is pretending to be in the archaeology business. Somebody asks what's in the magic boxes, and he's like, if those are uncovered, the death toll will be incalculable. Okay. End of part 2. Back at the airfield. Everybody's looking around, meaning Caretaker, David, Faith, and Hugh. I feel like her name should be Sarah. Faith does not feel like a very British name to me. Anyway, they're looking at the old plans. They're talking about how the field used to be, what used to be there, sharing memories. And then they're like, oh yeah, down there is back where there used to be an archaeology club. And they're like, a what? And the caretaker's like, yeah, my dad was very civic minded. He thought it'd be good to have a place where amateur archaeologists could dig. And I'm just like, oh, that's where the fucking boxes are. Because, obviously, right? Like, you're reading the book and you're just like, oh, we've got a quarter of it left, but I already figured out the ending. I hope you still...
I also love that he's like, oh, when I was a kid, my dad let them do this. I remember them digging around. And it's like, well, you're not so civic-minded then, are you? Why don't you have them digging around?
Also, the idea...
Because he pulls a gun on strangers.
Right. So this is where we then cut to the British parade.
Oh, yeah. That was unsettling.
Also makes no difference in the story because it's bookstore guy Jake Shapiro following the politician. Now, it does make sense eventually because we're going to... Oh, God, that's right. Okay, this is a sequence worthy of Dracula the series, actually. I mean, the show's good. Like, the show's fine.
Yeah, the show's good.
But I'm like, okay, guys, like, figure this out a little bit better. We're at the parade. Jake is following Llewellyn the politician. Back at the Bull Hotel, Payne is at the bar with David or something. Or David wants to go hang out with Payne. Because this is what the episode has been about. Remember? Our third scene of the episode was saying the whole episode was a ruse. The first episode was all bullshit to get us to this moment. Which means nothing.
Yeah.
But then Raiders of the Lost Ark, is it Raiders of the Lost Ark boss who comes in and is like, hey man, you're in a lot of trouble. Yes, because he's his boss. You've been talking to Shapiro. Llewellyn knows it. No more contact. This is straight from the old man. You can't do it anymore.
Yeah. No more contact with your Israeli buddies. No more.
No more contact. Our comic relief bellhop comes in and says, hey, Mr. Smith, you've got a man on the phone who wants to talk about utopia. The boss looks at him like dead in the eye because in theory, they heard his conversation with Jake. We established last episode that the Mossad all heard it because they have it bugged. But apparently Llewellyn somehow had it bugged. And David just looks at his boss. It's like, yep, gonna go talk to this guy about utopia right after you told me not to talk to the Israelis anymore. It's fine. Goes and talks to Jake, who's in a phone booth watching Llewellyn across the street meeting with the heir of the Middle Eastern looking guy from before.
Yeah.
Who is Syrian, by the way. We didn't know David had racially profiled him earlier, but he did. So Jake's like, I got two things I got to talk to you about. And David's like, I can't talk to you anymore, man. I'm in trouble. I shouldn't be talking to you. He's like, okay, well, one thing is Paynon is here or some shit. And then, oh yeah, also the other thing is the Syrians sold us out to Llewellyn because Llewellyn's in with the PLO. So there's an interesting subtext to this. I don't know the 1983 connotations, but you probably didn't frequently say that you're, at least not in the US. I mean, at least not in American stuff. Like, you would not have had anybody buddy up to the PLO and not be taken out.
For anybody who doesn't know, that's the Palestine Liberation Organization.
Yeah. So basically, he's pro-Palestine, and he doesn't like David because he's anti-Palestine. And at this point, you're just kind of like, okay, so now we're in sort of a problem here about our heroes, even when we don't Google them. Okay, but then they're like, well, we can't fucking talk, man. Sorry about that. Yeah. And Jake's like, shalom for now, buddy.
Yeah.
It's like, we'll see you later.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm going to miss you, Jake. Okay, pin in that also. But then we finally have our talk between David and Paynon, where they talk about the Middle East, where they talk about the boxing. David's like, you tortured and murdered people for this. And Paynon's like, that's exaggerating. The KGB doesn't use torture. And I'm just kind of like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. I mean, I would assume Stalin got on TV in 1952, took out his dick and was like, I beat people with this while we torture them. Then we get this whole conversation, which also means nothing because we don't deal with it here, is where David's like, oh yeah, by the way, do you think the aircraft's real? And Payton's like, nah, man, that thing's fucking fake.
Yeah.
But he's like, that's weird. I think it's fake too. Why would they do all this shit? And they're like, I don't know, man. They want to, somebody wants to rake this whole thing up. And they're like, well, we better go right along with these plans to figure out what the solution is.
And so again, it seems like they're buddy copping, having a buddy cop moment.
This is their buddy cop moment.
Yeah.
But it's, okay. It would be worse if they were supposed to have, if they actually had like some long-standing relationship, but it only makes sense in a way if they do. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
But then Hugh suggests to David that they, two MI5 civil servants, bug Llewellyn, the elected officials' house, and car. And David's like, that's a great idea, but how would we do it?
Yeah.
And Hugh's like, let's ask Colin. And David's like, that's a bad idea. But then Hugh's like, no, man, it's okay. His brother and I are friends.
Yeah. Very weird. Very weird. But it explains why then Hugh was the guy debugging the car earlier and doing all this stuff. And this doesn't happen in the book. Okay. The bugging of Llewellyn does not happen.
Maybe next.
Because Llewellyn, also, this is another big weird difference. Llewellyn has nothing to do with this. He's mentioned maybe twice, but there's no like, oh, Llewellyn says this, Llewellyn says that. You never see him, you never meet him. He's mentioned twice, but he comes back for the next book.
Okay. So then David goes up to the bedroom where this is where he and Faith talk about whether or not he just brought her along. No, they've moved on from this. Mm-hmm. She doesn't think that he's just after her for information. Now she's wondering if he brought her along to keep her safe or just to screw her whenever he wants to. And then he's like, well, I've fallen, or does she say I've fallen in love with you first? He says it. It's like, I've fallen in love with you. And she's like, I know, David. I feel the same.
Yeah.
Aw. I mean, they're not charming together, but it's weird. It's
It's fast. It's really fast and unsettling to me. That again, she knows nothing about him. He might know everything about her, but it's weird. But it happens in the book too. I mean, maybe not exactly the same way, but it's pretty obvious that they're going to be a thing. Which is good, because that means she's going to continue to be in more episodes.
And you'll possibly even get to see her naked. They might convince her to do it by the end of this series. They've got 4 more episodes. Because that's what being an actress in the 1980s and 70s was like. And for some people in the 90s too. That sort of only stopped in 2009 or something. I don't know. Obama had to be president. We couldn't stop forcing women to be naked in movies until there was a black president of the United States. But then we decided we'd burn down the world after that too. Anyway, so now we go to the basically the last scene of the episode, the action-packed conclusion, which is they go out to the airfield.
Yes.
They've got is this where they have the motorcycle? He like gives messages. Oh, Colin is on a motorcycle meeting with
that's
David.
right. That's right.
And it makes no difference. Like, this is a weird thing, but it's David being like, hey, are you gonna bug this house for me? And he's like, yes, I am. And he's like, cool. We're not going to report this, right? And he's like, nope. It's like, awesome. I think it's just that the guy who played Colin wanted to ride a motorcycle.
It was so funny because he like hops on his motorcycle and just like boom, takes right off. It was so weird, but it was cute. It made me like him a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah. Get invested right now, Emily. Right past the 2 cars arriving with Payne, his
Faith.
chief you spoiled it.
Oh, sorry.
His chief stooge, Jean Shalit, and Faith. Why is Faith the daughter of the smuggler there? Because Payne saw her in the restaurant and was like, ladies get bored, so why don't I bring her along?
And I thought, what's going to happen to Faith here? Because again, it's the 80s, and you bring a lady around to the conclusion of a mystery, and she's going to get held hostage, right?
Or she could be the double agent.
Yes.
Okay. So then we have
who was in the second car? Was it Robin Sachs?
No, because Robin Sachs isn't here. There's some guy along who digs. I don't know. I don't think we ever established who's in the second car. I don't think it ever actually comes up. But there are 2
I feel
cars.
like that would have stuck out to me. But yeah, I don't remember that.
Because I made a comment. My note has got a motorcycle and 2 cars, meaning, it's a pretty complicated shot there. But maybe it was David's car already parked.
Maybe.
But there is an MI5 stooge digging up. And then the scene ends with Payne telling Jean Shalit to help dig. He says, dig, comrade. After saying, hey, my archaeology cover came in handy, huh? Winkety wink. Then we cut to the back to the office where Colin is bitching about how he is going to bug Llewellyn to some guy. So Colin said last scene, I'm not telling anybody about this.
And then immediately rats him out. Immediately.
Just to the fucking office clerk. Like, this guy's like, hey, man, I need to check in your car keys. And he's like, this motherfucker wants me to bug this elected official. It's going to be a long night. I didn't get to play footy, bitches. Yeah. Old man boss comes in and is like, weird thing going on here. How long ago did you last run a sweep? He's like, 2 weeks. Weird you're doing it again so soon. Yep. Have you been up north with David? Yep. Okay, well, don't let me stop you, Colin. So the head of MI5 is now bugging the MP. It's fine, whatever. I mean, it's like normal. This is okay. We then come back to the airfield where we get more of Payne and David, only it's not that fun anymore. And at this point, Faith is just, I think she spends the rest of the episode standing in the background.
Just standing in the background. She doesn't say a word. They only shoot her when she's just happens to be around the other guys. Nothing for her to do. Almost forget she's there. And in the book, David forgets she's there.
Nice. Okay. So David's like, okay, well, we find the boxes. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take them to a holding location. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And then we'd really like to show off the Czar's treasure before it leaves the country.
Yeah.
And Payne's like, oh, we should play chess together someday. And David's like, well, let's play this game first because it's a chess game. Waka, waka.
Hey, that's the name of the TV show.
It is the name of the TV show.
Wow, that's clever.
Okay. They find the boxes. Payne pulls a gun out and is like, fuck that. We're taking these to the Soviet embassy.
Yeah.
And David's like, well, you can't. What about your stooge there? He can't do that. And he's like, ha, my stooge has full diplomatic protections. We've seen Lethal Weapon 2. And it also, at this point, Payne says something like, I'm a barbarian. He's like, don't be a barbarian. And Payne's like, ha, I am a barbarian. Those fucking Russians, those Soviets. This scene, the funny part about this scene is the guy, the MI5 stooge who was digging up the box, while they're pointing guns at each other, he's still digging up the box. He's not paying attention to anything else that's going on. He's digging up the box at this point.
He's dissociating, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. So then Gene Shalit gets a machine gun, but he points it at Palin because Gene Shalit isn't one of those Russians that would... He's one of those Hungarians or some shit that they barely mentioned last time and we were supposed to remember. That doesn't come up. We just know that he's double-crossing now, too.
Yeah.
So this is where I'm just counting down for Faith to pull out a gun, too.
Yes.
Okay. They break off the locks, and what do they find? They find files. So then... they say, the dude says, gun dude, Gene Shalit's like, you're going to burn all that shit. And then he's like, well, then what can we do? And then he's like, then you're going to make diplomatic progress with Payne or something. But wait, in come the gunships with music and a very long sequence.
Very long. A little too long. They needed to fill a little time. Fill a little time.
So David gets the gun. How does he even get the gun?
I don't even remember.
He tells Payne or somebody they're going to kill somebody or they're not going to kill somebody. You better give it up. And they give it up. Hugh and the other good guys show up. This is where Hugh's got his rifle and his like polyester fucking Michael Jackson jumpsuit. And like, dude literally does like, he doesn't do you don't know what this is. The Black Widow pose. Some of our people know what this is. He does the 1980. He does like a music video male version of the Black Widow pose. Like he's real excited to get to do his action sequence. Somebody made fun of Robin Sachs during this shoot. I'm sorry. It was a bit much. So then we find out what was in the boxes. The boxes are a plot to overthrow. So from the late... Also, didn't we screw up the year? Like in the first one, the plane crashed in 1956, but in this one they talk about 46 a lot.
Because this is post-war... No. Now I'm confused. So These are plans to overthrow Stalin.
From during the war.
And proof that Stalin killed 400 people or whatever in the Red Army that were involved in the plot. Or am I confusing it with the book? Because it's the same. It's the same thing. So essentially in the book, it's like this plot to overthrow Stalin, but they have to, these 400 officials in the Red Army have to plot with Hitler to do that, which would just like throw the allyship out of whack and would have looked bad for the Russians because then they would have been on the losing side, but also just the balance of power would be nuts. And during the Cold War, obviously, even if it was the end of the Cold War, near the end of the Cold War in 1983, it would have just been like, oh shit, you guys were going to join the Axis powers and But
they don't talk about the 400 thing.
I think they do. Doesn't Robin Sachs? He's like, I've got a list of 400 names here. Like, there's one page that has like the plot and one page that has 400 names. Again, I shouldn't have read the book.
That's the book. Okay. No, because this is all into. You can't read in the movie, in the show. Do you see how good he looks in that outfit? He doesn't read. No, Payton explains it all to David, and they don't mention the 400. Okay. So basically the idea is, and it wasn't they were going to overthrow Stalin and like get out of the war. It was they were going to overthrow Stalin and join the Axis.
Yeah.
Which would have changed the outcome of the war probably, and it also would have you wouldn't have had a Soviet Union anymore. You would have had a Nazi European continent plus half of Asia, whatever. Yeah. So presumably they wanted to bring the boxes back and fucking track down all the traitors that are still alive and kill them and their families, because that's what they do. And the bad guy, or the Gene Shalit, did not want his comrades to be killed like that. Now, last episode, it made it sound like Gene Shalit and his dudes were just Hungarians who thought the Russians sucked. No, they're fucking Nazis.
Yeah.
This is like that whole thing that, we get to go through in life now, where it's like, oh, no, they're just fucking Nazis. Like, no, fuck that guy. He was a fucking Nazi. Okay.
Not Gene Shalit, this character.
No, Gene Shalit. Oh, yes. No, not Gene Shalit. No.
The character who looks like Gene.
Who looks like Gene Shalit. Gene Shalit's fine, Emily.
He's dead, isn't he?
Probably. I don't know. So, yeah. And then Raiders of the Lost Ark boss shows up and is like, all right, David, this is your call. What are we going to do to resolve this situation? And David's like, well, it's pretty simple. Well, he's like, I could either screw you over with Gene Shalit looking dude and get you killed in Russia, but really what we're going to do is we're going to send you your shit back with you, and then we're going to let this fucker go after you're already back in Russia. So nice to meet you, Payton. And everybody's like, wow, that was a bold move, David, but good job. And then Payton's like, aren't you in trouble? And this is where David is like, well, I'm always in trouble. And I'm like, really? No, you weren't. You weren't. The whole point of you was you've never been in trouble enough for it to matter. But now you're in trouble. Now you're roguish.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's why it's anti-Semitic talk. Okay. So then we cut to a garage where Colin is talking to some dude while working on Llewellyn's car. There is some anti-Semitic talk. Then there is some talk about how it can't be anti-Semitic because Arabs are Semitic too. So we're having that argument. But then somebody's like, well, where is fucking Llewellyn tonight? And he's like, oh, he had an unexpected dinner date with an Israeli bookseller, Jake. Bum, bum, bum. We think that's the bum, bum, bum. But then Colin, who's busy putting one of the tracking devices that we established earlier on the car, he's putting it on and he's like, hey, this is weird. It's like, oh no, what's that? And it's like some thing that is like clearly a thing. And Colin, the bomb detection expert, bomb placement expert, is like, let me fucking touch it. So he flicks it with his finger and a car bomb goes off, killing Colin, our most likable overall character, because Emily hasn't Googled him yet.
It was shocking, and I'm not going to Google him. It was shocking. I gasped.
Can you?
The gaspiest gasp.
See my note.
Colin, a lot of exclamation marks on that note.
Because I'm like, no, I am enjoying Colin. I want him to be back.
Yeah.
But now he's not going to be, or they're going to do the thing where he's disfigured for 2 episodes and then he's back. So outstanding plot threads. We have quite a few. We never established Dad is dead.
We don't
know what happened to him. He could be in prison. I mean, we haven't necessarily cleared Faith of being a secret agent. She could be a bad guy too. The whole Llewellyn. Why is Jake meeting with Llewellyn? Like, what's that going to do for the plot going forward? I mean, it's kind of like, but they don't acknowledge they have all these loose threads either, which is a little weird. Like, it's not like, hey, next time on Chessgame, we're going to answer these outstanding questions. It's like, you like Colin? You just
Yeah. Bye.
like,
It was
and
weird.
then the end credits are over the bird. Like, they're just like, oh, did you like him at all? Here, watch a bird. There he is birding over the end credits.
Yeah, at least they didn't have him like running around,
Right.
flailing with flames coming off of him.
Wild ending.
Yeah, it was nuts. It was nuts. It was really good though. I really enjoyed it. I finished watching the episode before I finished the book. I'm not going to do that again though.
Okay.
Because it was too confusing for me to, again, have all the characters in my mind and their voices and everything. And then I couldn't tell which was the book and which was the TV show, except for a few things which I noted like in my brain.
Does the book have awkward sex scenes written by a man?
No.
Okay.
No. Just the awkward dialogue about how like, oh, well, you're going to marry me. Just that kind of thing.
I mean, she's a Russian. Maybe she's gonna blackmail him into marrying her. Who knows? We got 4 episodes left. Who knows? Yeah. I mean, cool.
And also, there's no ex-wife. Also, there's no Stu. He has like a female caretaker who like helps him around the house, cooks him food, that type of thing. So there's no Stu.
The stew also should have sort of come back in this episode because him having to eat at the hotel is going to throw him.
I mean, if you eat stew, yeah. I mean, you're already diarrhea, but is going to be even more thrown off by having like other food.
Right. And do you really want to share a hotel room with your secret agent Bond girl fuck buddy while you're just like blowing out the back of that toilet? Think, and Terrence Stamp was just like, ladies like this. She's just like, God, I don't like this. He's like, you're not allowed to talk right now. Winston Churchill said women should be at the home.
Stop making grunting noises. It's gross. Oh.
Okay.
All right. On that note, the next episode, episode 3, will be halfway through, is Enter Hassan.
That's who Art Malik plays. So we're gonna have some 83 anti Middle East Islamophobia / just general brown people racism. So buckle up. Buckle up.
Richard Wilson's gonna be in it. He's cute.
I'll have to see if I recognize him.
He's from One Foot in the Grave, which is a popular sitcom.
Is it as popular as 4 Weddings and a Funeral?
I mean, over there. Anyway, thank you all for listening to our podcast this week. Join us next time when we watch episode 3, which I just said was Enter Hassan. See you next time, Andrew. See you in Television Land.
See you in Television Land, Emily.